This segment of the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast is sponsored in part by Dark Horse Tackle. Go to darkhorsetackle.com and use promo code BKB5 to save an extra $5 when you build your own box. Douglas Outdoors. Serious rods for serious anglers. Norsk Lithium. The lithium kayak battery you need is just a click away. Go to norsklithium.com. Catch Outdoors, the official measuring board for all 3 national trails. Go to catchoutdoors.com and use promo code BKB5 to save 5% on your next online purchase. All right, everybody. Welcome once again to the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast. This is the real life segment with your boy Armando. And I don't know, kind of StreamYard here kind of changed the format of everything here. So the intro was kind of quiet there for 30 seconds ago or so. So I apologize about that. I'm still trying to figure out a couple of things here. I hate it when they do unannounced updates to the one more thing. Hold on, everybody. I'm almost there. Heck, like I said, I hate it when they do unannounced updates on the system. And then I'm trying to figure out, what do I do here? What am I supposed to do there? And where do I click here? So anyways, welcome once again to the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast. Today, we're going to have a great episode for you today. As always, how we start up with that. But yes, truly, Bryan Howell is here. Friend of the program, as they say in showbiz. He's been on the podcast quite a few times. Great angler that from California moved to Texas a few years ago and has found a lot of success both in the national trails and local trails here in Texas, such as the North Texas Kayak Championship. Last year, he was a runner-up. This year was the winner as the AOY for the North Texas Kayak Championship. And we're going to be talking about his season at that local tournament, what it took for him to win AOY. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Caddo. He also fished Caddo, got to catch a check on Caddo. So we're both going to be talking about Caddo. I got to fish Caddo. And what I wanted to do with that is give the perspective of anglers at different skill levels. For example, Bryan Howell, I considered an elite angler. He's been in the running for the Hobie BOS AOY. He's won Angler of the Year here in Texas. So he's very successful. For him, what he views as success, that level is a lot higher than what I would view as a successful tournament. So we're each going to kind of break down how our day went in Caddo, or our tournament went in Caddo. So you kind of relate to, what it is feel like to, be an elite angler and catch a check, and what is to be an amateur or a so-and-so angler like myself, and finally get to at least put a 2-day limit together, even if it wasn't catching a check. So that's where we're heading with that. Other than that, I wanted to mention somebody posted on social media, and I'm not upset at it at all. Actually, I like constructive criticism. I don't view myself as being above constructive criticism, but somebody mentioned that in my last episode with Damien Tao, they were disappointed because I talked too much and didn't let Damien talk enough. So keep in mind, I do appreciate that. That's something that I am aware of, that I want to improve as a podcast, kind of let my guests do more talking than I do. After all, a lot of you tune in to listen to my guests, not necessarily me. Do keep in mind that sometimes guests may be a little bit shy, or don't like to talk too much about themselves or their accomplishment, or don't want to share secrets of how they, have been successful. So I kind of have to fill in those blanks. And when I get guests like that, I do have to talk a little bit more. But yes, I will make an effort for my part, to let my guests do most, if not all, the talking. But again, not upset at somebody putting that on the comments. I really do appreciate it. Anybody that has any constructive criticism for my social media, my podcast, feel free to put it on the comment section. As long as it's respectful, I would take it as advice and try to implement it if I see fit. For those that are new to the podcast, remember you can follow us on social media, Bass Kayak and Beers, in the Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We have 2 podcast episodes a week. This is the live fuel, the real life, and we also have the Advanced Kayak Angler hosted by Kurt Smith. Those episodes usually come out every Wednesday morning at 5 a.m. Central Time, and those are more catered to product reviews, techniques, baits, seasons, how to catch bass in fall, winter, summer, safety tips, all that kind of thing. So it's more of an educational type of podcast hosted by Kurt Smith, who's a great angler in his own right. So, anyways, let's get on with the episode. Let's bring our guest in here if I can get this. There we go. Brian, how you doing, man? Thank you
I'm
so much
doing
for
well.
joining the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always a good time to be on here talking fishing. Nothing better.
Yeah, man, it's really happy for you. This year it's been a great season for you locally. You got to win a couple of tournaments, both North Texas Kayak Championship. Did you win any of the Texas Bass Nation or any other? You got any wins on any of the?
Well, yeah, I won. So the joint event, the North Texas
Yeah.
and the Texas Bass Nation, the fork one. So I won both of those same day, but
Yeah, so it still counts as 2 wins.
Yeah.
How do you feel like has been obviously a very successful season for you? I don't think you've won AOY yet in the short years or the few years that you lived here in Texas from California. You haven't won AOY yet, right?
No, I won AOY fishing in float tubes in California one time, and then I moved to Texas, and I've been second place for AOY or third place, almost every single year for a couple of different trails. Back the old East Texas trail that no longer exists. I was second place for AOY for that a couple of years, and North Texas, I've been second place for AOY for that a couple of years, I think, or at least in the top 3, and then I was been in the running kind of for other ones, and it's just until now, finally I took the actual first place trophy for AOY.
Always the bridesmaid, never the bride up until this year. Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
Do you feel like you fish better this year? And I ask that because it might be a simple answer saying yes, you want AOY, but sometimes it's the competition is not as tough and you don't feel like you've fished as good. It's just that the competition wasn't as tough last year, as it's been in the past. Do you feel like you actually up your game this year? Do you get that feeling without counting the AOY? Do you feel like when you look at individual tournaments, you feel more accomplished this year?
Not really, honestly. Like, I feel like this year was a tougher year for me. Like, I cashed plenty of checks, don't get me wrong, but I was more consistent rather than just like blasting it out of the park a bunch of times and getting first places. I think I had like a first place early in the year when we just the little Sunday derby at Athens when it was like just ridiculously cold outside, and then I had some second places and some third places thrown in throughout the year, and then a couple eighths and ninths and sixths and whatever, just cashing checks. And then finally, when I had that fork tournament where I won both the North Texas and the Texas Bass Nation, that's really when I felt like I just absolutely smashed them and, performed my absolute best.
Yeah, I remember Ray Roberts was a struggle for all of us. You felt like you ended up actually catching like 3 that day, right?
I think I caught 4 that day, and I cashed a check with 4 fish. Like, I think I have it right in front of me. I had like 69.25 inches and somehow, just that tough. I feel like this year was just a bunch of tough tournaments in a row. It wasn't necessarily that I was fishing bad. It was just the lakes were fishing bad. You had a few guys that would really catch them, and then everybody else would just struggle.
Yeah, I feel like this summer in particular has been really, really tough compared to other years. Like I usually summer, I can catch, 4 or 5 fish, if I put 8 hours in. But this year was like, it was like, man, there's been a couple of times where I was like either about to get skunk. I think about twice this year I've gotten skunk, and I usually fish like 4 or 5 times a month. So and it's both were on summer. I was like, man, summer's been really, really tough this year. And I've talked to other anglers that have kind of shared the same opinion. Do you feel like summer for you has gotten a lot tougher this year than previous years?
I feel like the summer for me wasn't, I didn't really struggle. I feel like it was the springtime where I struggled personally.
Yeah. Has it
Yeah.
always been like that, or do you feel like this
Yeah.
was something new, like struggling on spring?
It's kind of always the same thing for me. Like I do really well pre-spawn normally, and then spawn I don't do great, and then post-spawn comes along and I start doing well again. And then summertime, I'm definitely a summertime angler. I'm good at fishing in the summer. I know that a lot of people are not good at fishing in the summer, which is part of the reason probably why I'm good in the summer. Like I'm probably decent in the summer, and then everyone else just isn't great or whatever.
What is it about summer bite that you feel like gives you an edge or makes you a better angler?
Usually there's grass in the summertime.
Yeah.
So I'm good with grass or like the offshore bite, fishing brush piles and stuff like that. I can do pretty well doing that. So between either fishing grass or fishing brush piles, I usually do pretty good in the summertime.
Well, and I always find that interesting. And you and I talked about this, I think, the first time you were on the podcast a couple of years ago. Like for somebody who lived most of his life, and correct me if I'm wrong, in California, where there's not a lot of lakes with grass, the fact that you're so good on grass is kind of, I don't know if the word is surprising, but you would feel like, all right, well, Bryan Howell is from California. He'll probably kill it at Possum Kingdom or probably kill it at, uh, Canyon Lake or any of those like kind of highline style reservoirs that we have in Texas versus a Lake Fork or Lake Athens, which I know you're pretty good at. You're more than pretty good at it.
Yeah, I mean the lake I grew up fishing is 200 acres, and it's just normally, as long as they don't spray the crap out of it, it's just loaded with grass. So, and otherwise it's pretty much a bowl, just a bowl of dirt basically. So I just grew up fishing a lot of grass, and that was always my favorite thing to do. I mean, yeah, you can go to other lakes around there, go fish rocks, and I don't know, there's not really much else other than rocks, honestly, in some of the other lakes, but yeah, you can go fish those, or you can just go fish grass and try to catch those big grass bass, and that's always been my favorite thing to do.
What is it about catching bass on grass that kind of, it caters to the way you fish? And I say that because I remember you and Minor, I think it was, or Nolan Minor, one of those two, when it was the Hobie TLC at Caddo, that you and Minor were saying like or Nolan, I can't remember, one of the Minor brothers, maybe it was both of them, saying like they didn't know how, they just didn't understand how bass behave in grass. Like to them, it was an enigma, which I thought it was interesting coming from one top two of the top anglers in the kayak fishing tournament. But what is it about grass that makes it so simple for you to catch bass?
Well, I think the simple reality is if there's grass, there's bass.
Yeah.
Honestly, grass is just such a good habitat for bass. You go to, like, if you just think about any grass lake, like, when have you been to a bad grass lake? They're always good. They're always just healthy lakes. You can it eliminates a lot of stuff. You can just be like, all right, I'm going to just go fish grass. Like, you don't have to think like, oh, do I want to go fish offshore and go fish brush piles? Oh, do I want to go fish docks? Oh, do I want to go do, crank riprap, whatever. Like, you can just go to the grass immediately. And if you know what you're looking for, if you're just in tune with it, then you can just immediately start catching fish usually.
That's interesting. I'm assuming it changes by season, right? But usually what's your first bait you're throwing in grass? Like when you see grass, what's the first thing you're thinking about?
Usually a jackhammer. That's just like a good all year round grass bait. It doesn't matter if it's the dead of winter and you're fishing, 37-degree water, or if you're in the middle of summer and it's like 90-degree water, they're gonna hit a jackhammer.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've experienced that in a couple of lakes, both in summer and in winter. So it's I think now that forward facing sonar has had a huge stake on the Bass Elite tournaments, MLF, Bass Pro, and that probably or might change in the future. It certainly has come up with some. There certainly has been some changes recently, and that are going to be in effect next year. But prior to the forward facing sonar craze, I've heard, and I don't know how official that is, that a chatterbait um, is kind of like the bait that has catch more check for anglers. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, not everybody tells the truth about what's going on for one reason or another. Maybe they wanted to plug in their sponsor. Maybe they don't want people to know the truth. But it seems like that's the common knowledge that chatterbaits or bladed jigs are
Yeah.
like the goat of tournament fishing.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's, the last probably, I don't know, maybe 10 years, at least for sure the last 5 years, it's been just a staple that's just cash checks everywhere, all over. Like it's so versatile. You can you don't have to fish it in grass. That's the thing.
Yeah,
I love fishing on docks. I mean, if you can try to kind of get it through brush piles, you can definitely fish it through brush piles, and you might lose a few, but like a few baits when you hang them up. But as long as you're kind of like soft with it, you have a plug knocker, you might be able to get them out. And rocks, it's so good on rocks too. You can just go along a dam or just bridge causeway or whatever, just chucking that thing around, and you're gonna catch fish on rocks. I mean, you can just find fish offshore that are just schooled up in the middle of nowhere and just kind of yo-yo it through those fish, and you'll catch fish just in 25 foot of water on a half-ounce chatterbait if you wanted to.
yeah,
There's really nowhere that you can't throw it.
yeah. And I also think it's for like when you think of the jackhammer, it has one of the heaviest one. It's like 1 ounce and a quarter. It's like, especially for kayak anglers, like if you don't want to throw like a deep diving crankbait for obvious reasons, we're not going to get into now, but that's like a good replacement for that. You can get it in as deep as you need to, and it'll stay at the depth that you want it to, depending on how fast you reel it. For significantly prolonger time than a deep diving crankbait, without having
Yeah,
to deal with the wear and tear of on your hands and
yeah,
pulling your kayak. So
yeah.
let's break down the season. You mentioned you had it in front of you, like you have like a sheet of paper where
Not
everything.
really.
So Ray Roberts was your first tournament. You didn't do great as far as your expectations, but considering the field and how everybody struggled, what place did you ended up on that tournament?
I believe it was ninth place. All I have right in front of me is just the North Texas, the AOY, just exactly how many inches I had. I don't exactly have the places in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it was definitely a top 10. I think it was ninth place. And, we had over 100 people for that tournament, I'm pretty sure. So,
Yeah, I think we did. Christine Fisher came down. Guillermo Gonzalez fished it. Matt Scott fished it. Um, then after that, what was the next tournament that you had that you actually
well,
fished on? North Texas Kayak
North
Championship.
Texas,
Yeah,
yeah. Texoma was the next one, and that was the one that it's your best three events. There's 5 events total. They take your best 3 for AOY. So the next one was Texoma, and they ended up dropping it because I only caught 53 inches there. Which if you're going for AOY and you catch 53 inches, that's not going to do any good for you.
yeah. You ended up kind of like more in the bottom of the field. What was it? Well, and
I don't.
Texoma. Oh, go
I
ahead. I'm
don't even
sorry.
think it was the bottom of the field. That's the
But
thing.
not
I think it
bottom,
was like
but yeah.
middle of the pack, maybe like a little bit higher than middle. Like it wasn't a bad finish necessarily with 53 inches, because that's what I'm going back to. Like the spring for me was just tough. Just all the spring tournaments. Like I had 53 inches. You think, oh, that's terrible. But then you look at the leaderboard and you're like, you didn't do that bad. You still
Yeah.
finished, in the top half or the top quarter of the field with, 3 fish or whatever.
And Texoma is really like completely different from what you mentioned that is your favorite style of fishing, like grass. I'm assuming, what did you fish on Texoma? Um, did you find grass, or were you fishing the
No,
dam or drop
no
shotting?
grass. I was drop shotting mostly and top water, throwing a jig. I mean, last year I actually got second place in the Texoma event, and it was just like I said, it was just tough this year for me, just the spring ones, because last year I got second place and I thought it was the best lake ever and it was phenomenal fishing. Everybody caught really good fish, and then we fished it this year and it just was like, it's disappointing. I think because the water came up and then, it was cold front or something came through and it was just not fishing good.
Smallmouth bass? You caught any smallmouth bass?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I caught any in that event this year, but last year, yeah, I caught like a 19 and a quarter
Nice.
smallie and then a bunch of small smallies, but I think the 19 and a quarter was the biggest one that I caught.
That's like a 24-inch bass here in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Like there was multiple like people I think caught smallies over 20 inches last year. This year, I don't know if really any people caught too many big smallies. It just seemed like last year was really good, which is why they put it on the schedule again, because everyone wanted to go back. They said, "Oh, it's so good," and we caught all these big smallies.
Guess again.
Yeah, guess again. We're not gonna let you have 2 good years in a row.
I think the two best lakes for smallmouth bass fishing is Texoma. I would put Belton in it as well.
Yeah,
and
Grapevine.
Grapevine, yes, they do release. You know what? I've never caught a smallmouth bass in Grapevine, but I know the Texas Wildlife Department has released some big smallmouth bass there.
I've seen people catch smallies over 5 pounds out of Grapevine.
Yeah, it used to be what was that? Whitney Lake used to have, but I think from what I understand, they haven't restocked them anymore in Lake Whitney. Possum Kingdom is sneaky. That you'll find some smallmouth bass there. The Brazos River, I call what I'm not a marine biologist, but what I call like a pure bronze. Like Texoma, you get kind of like those hybrid smallmouth bass are more green. In Possum Kingdom and in the Brazos River below the Possum Kingdom Dam, I've caught like those beautiful bronze, kind of like tiger patterns, leopard patterns. They have those lines.
Yeah, the pretty ones.
Yeah, the really beautiful. Those I really like. So to me, that's probably top 3. There's a little lake. I keep forgetting the name. It's not Mineral World. Somewhere down by Cleburne. I went with Dustin Nichols once. That also the one that has walleye. What's the name of that lake?
Is that Wheeler Branch?
Wheeler Branch, yes, Wheeler Branch. There's some good smallmouth bass.
Oh, really? Yeah, I've never been there before. But
you would probably love it because it's all grass. It's it's a huge pond that near the dam, I think it goes up to 100 feet deep. It's crazy. And the water clarity is like literally like 20 on a bright sunny day, you'll see like 20 feet deep.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. It sounds fun, but I don't know. I just don't really fish anything on that west side over there. Because I live, on the east side of DFW, so I have to drive all the way through Dallas, all the way through Fort Worth just to get to all those lakes on that west side over there.
Yeah, you get both traffic jams, Dallas and Fort Worth. It's
exactly. I just don't have the patience for that.
One you could do, 2 is like, no.
Yeah, exactly. You have 1, you're like, whatever, okay. But 2, no. And then it's like I can just go to the East Texas lakes, with 0 traffic because I'm already outside the city. So it's like, okay, just go right over to Fork, go right over to Athens, whatever, and just have fun there instead.
What was the next tournament that you took part in the North Texas Kayak Championship?
So the next one they had was Tawakoni, which I didn't get to fish that one. I think it was when I was moving. I really wanted to fish it because I've never fished a kayak. I've actually never been on my kayak on Tawakoni, but I've been there in a boat plenty of times. So I was looking forward to it, but unfortunately it didn't happen. So then after that, it was Gilmer, which was originally, I think, Grapevine.
Yeah.
And then, which it would have just been unsafe because it was 4th of July weekend.
Yeah. I love Duke. I love Duke, but I was like, come on, Duke. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing?
Yeah. It was just like, no, that's not going to happen. And then they changed it to Welsh. And then we go out on Welsh and there's just a giant fish kill. And no one submitted a fish for like the first 3 or 4 hours of the morning. And it was like, well, all right, I guess we'll cancel the tournament because no one's catching anything and there's just dead fish everywhere. If you wanted to cheat, you could have just gone and grabbed a 20-incher that was freshly dead and put it on your board. Like, so they didn't want to have that happening. So they ended up canceling it. And then they moved it to Gilmer, which I love Gilmer. Gilmer's probably one of my favorite lakes.
I've never fished Gilmer. I don't think I've ever heard of Gilmer. Where is that one?
It's an East Texas lake. It's just Gilmer, Texas. You know, I don't know
Really?
how to describe it. Gilmer, Texas, Lake Gilmer.
Grassy, I'm assuming?
Oh, yeah, that's got plenty of grass. It's just 1,000-acre lake, stained water, plenty of grass. I mean, tons of big bass, doesn't get a lot of pressure. I probably shouldn't be talking about it right now, honestly, but
No, I don't think I've ever heard of Gilmer.
yeah,
I probably heard of it, but I've definitely never fished it.
There's been a couple tournaments out there. You know, I won a tournament there in like, I don't know, 2018, not 18. That's when I moved here. I guess it's probably like 2020 probably is when I won an event there, 2019, something like that. You know, I've cashed a couple other checks probably since then there. And so for the North Texas event, I caught 93 1/4. And I think,
Really?
yeah, I think I got third place at that one, what did I say? 95 1/4.
And you got third place. Wow.
Third place with 95
who won?
1/4.
Michael Cates, maybe?
I think it might have been Flett.
Matthew? Oh, Matthew Flett. Right.
I think so. I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it was Flett. And if you get third place with 95 1/4, that tells you it's a good lake, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it was fishing kind of, it wasn't tough per se, but it was
Dan Gwen, he says, Matthew Scott's sister.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, Dan definitely won that one. Yep. Dan was fishing near me too.
By the way, quick shout out to everybody who's watching Mike M in YouTube. Thank you for watching, tuning in. Daniel Siemers. Oh my God, he told me how to spell the last part of his last name. I completely forgot. But just what up, guys? What do we have going here? We're talking about Bryan Howell winning the AOY for the North Texas Kayak Championship. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the Caddo Bassmaster after this, and then obviously Matthew Scotch. So what was that after? So, how did you catch him on Gilmer? Same thing, jackhammer, chatterbait?
Yeah, that was mostly jackhammer for that one. I mean, I had a ton of fish, just absolute ton. I probably caught at least 30 fish, almost all on the jackhammer. I think I got a couple maybe on a buzzbait, and I just wasn't getting the quality I needed to win it. You know, that was the thing. I think Dan had over 100, I want to say, or at least 99, if not 100 something. And it was fun. It was certainly fun, but for whatever reason, I couldn't find the big fish.
Well, 95 1/4. I mean, what is it? A quarter? You said?
Yeah.
Yeah, you still find some nice fish.
I mean, no doubt they were good fish.
Not
I had
the
like
biggest.
consistent quality, no doubt. Just no kicker. That's all I'll say. No kicker. I think they were all like maybe 20, around 20-ish inches, which is nothing to shake a stick at, but still.
Yeah. 95 1/4 inch would, be an awesome day anywhere. What's next after that?
And then after that is when they had Fork, which is the one I won.
Oh yeah, Fork. I had you on the podcast for that one, I think, right? I think I had you. Yeah.
You probably did, yeah.
Yeah, we did. We did talk about Fork.
I know you had me recently, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it must have been that, right?
I think I had you you were here on the podcast when you were either going into the TOC for the Hobie BOS your first season. Well, I don't know I assume it was your first season fishing it.
No, I think I was second season.
Something like that. Yeah.
Third season fishing it.
Yeah.
Something like
and
that.
Then you were like in a, like a good shot at winning it. And then since then, I think you were here for a lake. I want to say here you were for a Lake Athens tournament as well.
Probably.
It's the grass lake. But TLC, we talked about that. For those that are watching or listening, you can check that episode out. I forgot the name of it, but it was a couple of months ago for Lake Fork. Basically, what you found, same thing. You kind of found a point with some grass in it, and I think you were throwing a bluegill jackhammer.
Yeah,
right?
Just a bluegill jackhammer in the back of a creek, just kind of fishing around a creek channel, and there's plenty of grass back there. I think it definitely helped that this year they had at least 2 good grass lakes on the schedule. Plus, somehow that Ray Roberts one, I had no idea that was going to stay as one of my, events for the final 3 that count towards your AOI score. Like, I had no idea that was an count because I was like, oh, that's a terrible score, but ended up being fine. Just because they went off inches this year for AOI instead of your place.
Really?
So yeah, so the 106 and 3/4 I had at Fork
Yeah.
really went really far, because if I didn't say I had only caught 100 even, I wouldn't have even been close to AOI.
That makes sense. By the way, shout out to Carol Wells who's watching on Instagram. Good evening, Carol Gallant. Her kayak, follow her on Instagram. That kind of makes sense what you're talking about, because I was thinking it was by placement, and in my mind, I was talking to Michael Cates, and I thought, well, I told him like Matthew Scotch and Michael Cates. I told him like you guys are like. I told him like you guys. Who was it that I was talking to? I know Michael Cates and Matthew Scotch. I was like, okay, well, you guys are pretty much locked for AOI, because Matthew, I think I won a couple, or doing
I
was
think
high up there.
Matthew Flett was
Flett, yeah, Matthew Flett.
first place, and then it was like Scotch was in second place,
Yeah.
and then I was in third place, I think, going into the classic.
All right, but it was because third place on inches or placements?
By inches. So, because I had 106 and 3/4.
Yeah,
You take off 10 inches of that and throw it on to the Ray Roberts one, and then it ends up being a okay
yeah.
score, right? And it still ends up being a really good score for Fork.
Ah, okay, that's why. Because I thought it was based on getting first, second, third place, and that's why I thought, okay, well, Michael Cates, Matthew Scotch, one of those two is probably going to win it. Matthew Flett was also in the running. Then I know you were in the running, but when I saw you, it's like that you won it. I'm like, man, I thought like, because I thought it was by placement. And now it kind of makes sense. Like, okay,
Yeah.
that's why maybe um I was viewing it differently.
Yeah, I
I
made up a ton of ground just from that
Yeah.
one Fork tournament, really. If I wouldn't have smashed them there, then I wouldn't have even had a shot. Because I didn't even, before that tournament, going into just the later half of the season, I was like, I don't really have a shot at AOI. I'll probably end up, somewhere in the top 10 for AOI, if not maybe top 5 at best. But I figured I had no shot, and then I ended up going out there and catching them like that. And then I was like, well, I guess I do have a shot. I think somebody calculated the points before Duke posted them. They calculated it manually, and like, oh, dude, you're up there. I'm like, what? What do you mean? I was like, I guess. Okay. I'm not gonna
Interesting.
complain
I've
about
never
that.
seen it. Have you ever seen a tournament count by inches instead of like total inches instead of like
Yeah, I've seen it
placements?
happen a few times, and the way Duke kind of explained it, it made sense. I mean, either way, it's
Yeah.
as long as it's out there before the season starts, I don't think you can really go wrong doing it either way.
Yeah, no, as long as everybody's aware and
Yeah, as long
on
as
the
you're
same
aware.
page and understand it, then yeah, it's it is what it is. And somebody doesn't like it, well, there's other options, there's other trails. Um, yeah, when you put it, when we're gonna base it not necessarily in placement, but in total inches, yeah, Lake Fork is gonna be a wild card. Because that's either, Lake Fork can be feast or famine, right? Like
Yeah.
you either got 100 inches or you got skunk kind of thing. Like you typically don't see, middle ground. It's like
Yeah, you're
one or
right.
the other.
Yeah,
You're the
absolutely.
you're the epitome of that. And we've talked about it every time you're on the podcast. We talk about it. But the Bassmaster in Lake Fork, when it was freaking cold, and
Yeah.
one day you were, I don't know, you caught like 3, the next day you put up like
Yeah.
106 as well.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
to that
It can
point,
definitely be feast or famine on Fork. It's just one of those lakes where it can be tough for sure for probably 90% of people. It's a lake they go to like, dang, that was tough. But like people catch 2 fish all day sometimes, and they're like a 22 incher and a 21 incher or something, and they're like, it was tough, but the big fish are there. If you
yeah.
can trick them, you're gonna do well.
Cool, man. That's awesome. So congratulations on the North Texas Kayak Championship, first AOY here in Texas, man. Did you fish any other trails other than the North Texas? I'm assuming the AOY for does North Texas have an AOY? Like I haven't seen anything posted. I don't know if it
For which one?
for the not North Texas, for the Texas Bass Nation. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I mean, I did okay in that, and I don't know if they posted an updated thing or not yet, but I'm probably like I think Matthew Scotch is like way ahead of
Yeah.
everybody else. So it's like
And maybe I'm
insane.
confusing that one because I know there were a couple of tournaments that were like, hey, they were like in conjunction, North Texas and Texas Bass Nation. So I think that may be the one where Matthew Scotch and Michael Cates may be going like one or two, and probably Matthew Flett as well.
Yeah, I think
maybe there's some others.
I'm pretty sure they posted who qualified, and I was pretty sure it's like the order of the AOI, and is like Matthew Scotch and Larry Hill and Philip Wyatt, and then maybe me. I'm sure I'm forgetting one other person. It might be Flett. He might be in there too.
Nice. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Caddo. Like I wanted to, like I mentioned in the intro, kind of give the perspective of two anglers. Somebody like myself that I'm not nearly at the level that you are, and while my result for those 2 days I see as an amazing victory for me, that would probably be a very disappointing result for you because you're obviously an elite level. So I wanted to both talk about it. I feel good talking about it with you because I don't feel like I'm gloating, because obviously if there's anybody that can gloat, but the result be you more than me. So let's talk a little bit about Caddo, man. You fish Bistineau both day, right? Which is perfect.
Yeah.
Now you can talk about Bistineau, I can talk about Caddo.
Yeah, you're right.
What was pre-fishing for you in Bistineau?
So I think I went on Thursday to Bistineau, and I went fished one area, didn't do very good. Just I don't know. I feel like the water was just a little bit too low for where I first went, and then for the second half of the day, I went somewhere else. I did okay. I caught probably 80 something. I was like, there's fish here, and I didn't feel that great about it, so I decided the next day of practice to go to Caddo. So I actually did fish Caddo in practice. I fished all day Friday on Caddo, and there I also caught kind of 80 something. And I know just based off history and those lakes and everything, you catch 80 something, you're not going to do anything with that. You're going to finish 50th place or something, maybe, like at best. Yeah. Right? Like that's not a bad
I can tell
bag.
You that's exactly. You got it right on the dot.
Yeah, like you catch 80, 85, whatever. Like that's not doing bad. It just everyone else is doing just as well. So it's like you might be only 2 inches away from 20 places ahead of you. It's just always that tight because there's such good, healthy lakes. So I felt more comfortable kind of fishing on Caddo because I had fished Caddo. I've fished Caddo so many times, and there's plenty of grass on Caddo, no shortage of that. So I was kind of leaning towards Caddo. I was like, oh, do I just fish Caddo? But then my buddy Philip Wyatt, he was pre-fishing at Caddo too, and he didn't do any good. And I talked to a couple other people that fished Caddo. They didn't really do that good. And then I was talking to people that were fishing Bistineau, and pretty much everyone on Bistineau was like, yeah, they're doing pretty good. So and the thing about Caddo, no one was catching the big fish like they normally do. It was just weird just because that cold front rolled in. The fish were just in a funk, I guess, because the water temperature probably dropped, 10 degrees overnight practically. Yeah. And so I decided to fish Bistineau in the tournament just because I thought I had a better shot at getting a big fish. That was purely the reason why I fished it. I didn't think I would, I felt a little more comfortable on Caddo, but I just felt like the fish were not there on Caddo like they normally are.
Even though you caught it checked, do you feel remorse or, in hindsight, would you have fished Caddo? Would you still fish Bistineau, or you would have gone to Caddo?
I mean, I think I still made the right choice. Like you said, I cashed a check. You can't complain about cashing a check, even if it's not an amazing check. I didn't finish top 5 or anything like that, but hey, I still, made my money back and then some, so it's okay.
You mentioned Caddo, and I about the big fish. Caddo is interesting to me because Caddo, And I don't know, for those that have never fished Caddo is just a huge swamp. And it's never really deep. Like, I think the deepest part of Caddo may be 15 feet. And
Yeah.
it's usually in the river channels. Main lake is somewhere between 5 and 10 feet, in some areas even less. And I'd never seen, I don't, when I look at the history of Caddo, there's always one or two people that's going to catch a 24-incher. But when you look at like fork, right? You catch a 24-incher in fork, that may not be the biggest bass of the tournament. Like, you catch a 24-inch in fork, you're like, maybe it'll be the biggest bass of the tournament. Who knows? Especially on national trail. You catch a 24-inch in Caddo, you're like, yeah, this is the biggest bass of the tournament, more than likely.
I don't know. Even
maybe.
on Caddo, I feel like you can catch plenty of big fish like that too.
I think there's a lot of low 20s more than mid 20s. Like, for example, biggest bass I think for the tournament, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was a 22-inch and 3/4, something like that.
Yeah, it was 22 3/4. There was one 22 3/4 caught on Caddo, one 22 3/4 caught on Bistineau.
Exactly.
But like I was saying, I just wasn't fishing how it normally was. I feel like normally the big fish are there, and 23 1/4 doesn't get you crap normally at that event. I feel like, because it's just so many big fish in those lakes. Not necessarily Bistineau. I feel like Caddo has the big bass. Bistineau has like a good average quality, but Caddo is just loaded with 23s and 24s, I feel like.
That's the thing. I don't know. Like, you would know better than me. You're more accomplished angler, obviously. But I've always feel like 99 inches will most of the time get you a win at first place in Caddo. This one, you didn't, like, nobody broke 200.
Yeah.
So 90, you do 90, high 90s in both tournament, you're gonna get in the top 3. You're probably gonna get in the win. I was surprised to see Abi Amundasa, not because Abi Amundasa is not a great angler. He obviously is. But just in general, let's take Abi Amundasa's name out of it. I was kind of surprised to see, not usually surprised, but when I saw 102 inches, 102 3/4, something like that for Abi Amundasa day one, I was like, I thought he was fishing at Bistineau. I was like, maybe he wasn't fishing on Caddo, because 101 is the most I've seen in Caddo. I'm sure. I mean, like you said, there are 20, 24 inches. I just think it's kind of one of those, kind of looking at like in a vacuum, right? Where you have, okay, you're going to have a few hundred more 24 inches, but you're going to have like 500 more 18s and 20s that are probably going to get your bait before you can get it to a 24 inch. And, you understand kind of thing? It's kind of like it's in relation to the population. Like, yes, it's going to be more, but because it's such a huge lake and there's so many 18, 20-inch bass that it's harder to catch those 24 inches. That's my take on Caddo. I could be wrong, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's a lake fork, but I feel like it's still a big bass factory. You're going to catch low 100 inches on Caddo versus a fork. The sky's the limit on fork.
Yeah. What was your day one for you? You talked about pre-fishing, and before you answer that, I want to go back, because the Bistineau kind of took fame when Cody Milton and Guillermo Gonzalez went to a slugfest in the KBF National Championship, which was same thing, Caddo and Bistineau, and both of them did 3 days in a row of 100 inches, like something like 303 Guillermo Gonzalez and 302, something like that. Cody Milton, which was an all-time great tournament. I've said it before. Wish that would have been televised. That would have been awesome to watch that. A lot of it came down to, well, the season is where this time of year where, like, from what I understand, and I'm not an expert on Bistineau, but they draw it down for duck hunters. Did you saw that? Was the lake draw it down? And the thing about that is, a lot of people say, well, now it's easier to catch those bigger bass because they're more grouped together, not freely roaming around the whole lake. They have to concentrate on now where it's deeper. Do you felt like that's an accurate assessment of what Bistineau is at this time of year?
Oh yeah, I think it's down like what 8 feet, something like that.
Really?
And yeah, it's down. It's way down. It's to the point where there's only maybe, you know, 2 or 3 ramps on the whole lake that are still in the water. All the other ones, I mean, all the boat guys, they can only launch out of one ramp on the entire lake because the water. You could launch a kayak at some of the other ramps, but you don't want your $100,000 boat and trailer going off the end of the ramp and getting damaged or something.
Yeah.
So everybody has to launch at one little ramp for the boats. And if you just look at Bistineau, that's the thing. I was looking at it the other day. I was looking out at all the miles of cypress trees, and I was like, man, I would never, ever, ever, ever want to fish this lake when it's at full pool because there's just. You think Caddo's a lot of trees? Bistineau is even more
Really?
trees.
More?
Yeah, it is
More than
more
Caddo?
trees. It's insane. And there's no grass or anything like that because they drop the water. So I assume, it kills off all the grass if there is any. And it's just, you just look at it and it just looks insane. Like the trees just go back for miles and miles and miles.
Wow. I've never fished Bistineau. I never even seen Bistineau, but I didn't think it could possibly have more trees than Caddo, but I'll take your word for it. So was it crowded? Boat ramp and the lake itself, like did you had to navigate through traffic? Do you had to share spots? Was it I got the feeling I didn't think Caddo was as full as I've seen it other times. The other times that I fished at Bistineau was not in the mix. In other words, you
Yeah.
only were able to fish Caddo. This time is the first time that I've personally fished it that you can have that option. Oh no, maybe I think no. I think the Hobie BOS was last year, a couple of years ago, was Bistineau as well. So I may be
Yeah, but
wrong.
that was in the spring, so the water
Yeah.
was up. So I
Yes.
didn't even look at Bistineau that time. I just knew immediately, no, I'm just gonna go to Caddo. Just from what I knew about Bistineau, I didn't want to be on it in the
So
springtime personally.
when I look at the attendance, 195, I'm like, Caddo's not even that full. Like full of anglers. Like I was like, like literally, I had a spot. I had a spot of about, I don't know, like a football field size, and I was like, oh, sweet, I have this whole part of the lake for myself
Yeah.
for 2 days. As far as other kayak anglers, there was some boat anglers, and we'll get into that in a little bit. A lot of boat traffic, but so do you feel like you had to navigate once the tournament started between, I want to fish this spot, but there's people there, kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, initially just the ramp, there was like 3 boat tournaments going out of there, not like
Really?
big boat tournaments, but smaller boat tournaments. I don't know, maybe, 20, 30 boats per tournament. And all the guys, all the kayak guys launching there. The ramp was a mess. It was just parked up like crazy and everything. So I'm not a guy that normally carts my kayak. I hate carting it. But that morning I decided to cart it because, there's just so many people there. And then we take off and just go fish. And I'm just fishing down the lake, fishing all my stuff. And there's, people on. It seemed like it was fishing small compared to, I don't know, like how I thought it would kind of be. It was just like certain areas go miles with no one. And, there's a reason why no one's there because there's not
Yeah.
really many fish there. And then you'd fish one little key area, and you might have 1 to 3 other guys there fishing that one little key area with you, and you're just kind of cycling through fishing the trees. That everyone's just fishing trees. I mean, it can withstand that, but it felt a little bit crowded for sure on day one. And then you had all the boat guys from those tournaments and everything, just fishing the same exact spots that we were all fishing.
And that was like what happened day 2? Was it the same thing?
Day 2 really wasn't as bad. I mean, I got there in the morning and there was barely anybody at the ramp compared to the first day. I think a lot of the guys that had fished at that ramp, they had caught them way further down the lake, so they decided to launch down further down the lake at some other ramp down there. And the boat guys, there was like barely any boats at all. And my spots really had no one almost. I mean, I fished, I want to say pretty much no one other than Guillermo. Guillermo was there fishing some of the same stuff as me. I ran into him a couple times, and it is definitely a lot more. People were either, I think they, like I said, they're down the lake, so it wasn't as bad. And but the fishing was tough though. So I mean,
What
day 1 was crowded, but at least it fished better.
if I'm gonna ask you honest questions, I know this kind of like hurts the ego to even ask you this. Maybe not your ego, but I would feel like somebody asked me this, I'll probably hurt my ego because what it implies. But when you fish, and again, you're an elite angler, I'm not. So I want to see your perspective on it. When you fish in the same area Guillermo Gonzalez fishing, Guillermo Gonzalez fishing, and you're putting up, you know, the numbers that you were putting up. Remind me again, what did you put up on day one, day two?
I think I had 91 on day 1 and 92 and some change
Yeah,
on
92,
day
92 and
2.
a half, I think,
Something
which
like
is
that,
not
yeah.
bad. But then you see Guillermo Gonzalez, putting up 98, 99, stuff like that. Does it do anything psychologically to you? It's like, good Lord, I'm fishing the same thing. Like we're fishing the same spot. Like, does that ever, to me, that's demoralizing when I'm fishing a spot in the same place and I'm like, good Lord, we're pretty much fishing the same spot. Why am I not getting the same results? Obviously, the reason is they're a lot better anglers. But does that do anything to you?
Not real. Not if it's Guillermo. If
Yeah,
Guillermo is catching him, like I know that guy can catch him out of a mud puddle in the
yeah.
parking lot. Like he's the last guy I want to be fishing behind because a lot of the stuff, like on the first day, I was fishing behind him. I was like, this is good water, but do I really want to fish behind him? I was like, I guess I'll fish it. I didn't end up catching any fish really behind him at all, but I had to give it a shot because it was a good area. But he's definitely the last guy I want to be fishing behind.
What were you throwing on, if you don't mind me asking? Again, I ask the questions. I know some anglers don't like to give too much information. I'm not gonna ask you where you caught them because I know that's like a no to ask that. But as at least specifically where you caught them. But what were you throwing? Were you targeting grass? Was there any grass still at that lake at that point? Because I think
No,
you
no
mentioned there's no
grass.
grass.
No grass at all. I just fished in the cypress trees, dirt shallow, like a foot, maybe foot and a half out to like 3 feet of water. And I was flipping a jig. That was my initial idea going into the tournament because in practice, I didn't really, like I said, I didn't have a good practice where I fished initially on Bistineau, and then I found a different area where I did okay, and I was just flipping a jig. And it was probably 30 minutes. I caught like 5 fish on a jig in 30 minutes, just flipping cypress trees in practice. So I was like, well, I figure I can just go on Bistineau and just flip a jig all day long, just flip my arm off. That's the thing that sold me on Bistineau because I'm good at flipping. Like I can go to dang near any lake that has flippable cover and just go flip up a decent little limit. And usually when you're flipping, you get some better bites. So that's why I figured I would go on Bistineau and just 2 days, just flip until my arm fell off.
That literally, it's funny that you mentioned that because what's today? Thursday. Tuesday, I still couldn't lift my arm off above my shoulder. Like literally, I was in so much pain. My shoulder was in my hand. My hand was like cramped. Like my hand was like the shape of like how I palm my reel. Like literally, I was walking with my hand like
Yeah.
I was palming a reel, and I could not lift my hand above my shoulder. Wednesday kind of felt good. Today feels fine. But I was like, good Lord, I don't think I've ever felt so much pain. And it was just constantly doing the same thing. When that wear and tear of you like flipping, especially if it's like a heavy ounce uh punch or jig, dude, it is. And especially if you're using a flipping rod, where the reel tends to be a little bit heavier, where the rod tends to be a little bit heavier, the bullet weights tend to be heavier. Dude, it'll cause some wear and tear on you once you're done after those 2 days of
Yeah.
tournament, 2 days of pre-fishing.
Yeah, that's really why like I fish, Dobbins rods, and I have a Dobbins Champion XP, the 765 flip, and it's just so balanced. It may not be the lightest rod in the world, but I feel like balance is more important than being light for
Yeah.
sure. Just like you just can flip all day long, and personally, I feel fine with it usually. Like, yeah, if I'm like kind of at an angle, because I hate like I definitely, you're in a kayak, you have to be fishing sitting for a lot of the time. But like if you're kind of like turned off to the side, yeah, my shoulder will
Yeah.
hurt. But if I'm like faced forward, I have no issues with it.
I think that's what happened to me. I was a lot fishing on angles just because
Yeah.
there was some wind. Um, was that what got you the bites on Saturday and Sunday? Was it the same thing you were throwing on pre-fishing?
So Saturday, yeah, I threw the just like a half ounce, 6 cents, whatever the flipping jig is. I think it's the hybrid jig. That's the Divine hybrid jig,
Yeah.
black and blue with a black and blue missile baits D-bomb on there, and that's what I fished and practiced. And on day one, it got, I didn't have a ton of bites on it. I caught 7 fish only on day one. I think I lost like a 20-incher and had a couple more bites that I missed. I wasn't getting a ton of bites for sure. I know some guys were, but that was not me. I was just flipping my arm off, making 10,000 flips in a day just to get 7 fish in the boat.
Yeah.
And then day
Same
two
here.
came along, and day two was tough for me. Like I flipped around with that same jig, didn't have a bite, and then I'm just moving along, and then I see just fish busting out, kind of like in the creek channel or like a little just depression or whatever out there. So I was like, I don't think that's bass, but it might be. It kind of looks like white bass or something else. I could definitely tell there was some gar in there. So I just take a little spinner bait, chuck it in there. First cast, it just gets destroyed. And I'm thinking like, oh, this is fighting too hard and it's not coming up. It has to be a gar. And then I get it to the boat and it's a 20-incher. I'm like, what the heck? Like, that was the most random 20-incher of my life. I was like, but I'll take it. I was like, if there's more bass in here, then I'm going to be doing really well. But then I, take a picture of that and everything, throw back out, keep fishing like crazy, not getting any bites. The bass, or what looked like bass, weren't popping up anymore at all. You could still see plenty of gar popping up. And I was like, you know what? Like, I haven't had my live scope in the water this entire tournament because we're fishing like dirt shallow trees. But I'll put my live scope in and just see if I can see that school of bass swimming around anymore. So I'm just scoping around. I don't see those fish swimming around anymore, but I see this giant stump, not a little stump, just like huge stump. And there's a couple of bass sitting on it. I'm like, oh, okay. So I chuck over to that stump and just reel my spinnerbait right up to that stump and like hit the stump, and then kind of pops off the stump. Then boom, a 19-incher smashes it. So I caught a 19-incher scoping. And then after that, I
How
was like,
deep
oh,
water?
that was probably like 8 or 9 feet, I want to say.
Oh.
Like it was, it was like a little creek channel.
Yeah.
So it was deeper water there. And I thought maybe I could catch some more fish doing that. I did that for another hour or so, probably. Didn't have another sniff other than gar. I mean, there was plenty of fish on there. Like, is that a bass? You look at them and, they were kind of at an angle or whatever. And you're like, it might be a bass. Okay. And you're reeling through, and then they turn and you see it's this just long image on the screen. You're like, that's not a bass. And then it smacks it and then you miss it. And you're like, it was just a gar anyway. But yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, I couldn't catch any more fish like that. And so I decided, well, let's just start flipping again. I went down the lake, just started flipping, still had no bites. I ran into Guillermo again on one of the spots I was fishing, and he saw me flipping a jig. And I think before this, I had tied onto a smaller jig. I was like, I'm not getting bites on this. Like, it was not a giant jig, but a pretty good sized jig. So I was like, I'm not getting bites. Let's try to downsize, because in the past for me, that's been a good thing, where if I caught them on day one on one jig, that's a big one, and they're not biting on day two, or if it's tough, just switch to a small jig. So I switched to like a little 3/8 missile baits, like the Ike's mini flip, I think is what it is, with a whatever the little like D chunk, I think, for missile baits as well. I had that on the back of there. So I just flipped that around and still wasn't getting bites, which I was just shocked. I was like, how are there not fish on these trees? I was like, okay. And I almost wanted to give up on it and go do something else. And I ran into Guillermo, and he was like, oh, if it makes you feel any better, like, I've caught all of my fish on a jig today. And I was like, oh, okay.
It doesn't make you feel any better at all.
No, it did give me a little extra confidence boost.
There you go.
Because I know he hadn't really been fishing that in the tournament until the day two, and he was like, I caught all my fish on that. I was like, well, okay, if he is catching them on it, then I guess I'll just stick with it. So I just stuck with it for a while longer, just get that little extra confidence boost, knowing that I'm not doing something wrong. I'm just maybe not in the right areas. I'm not fishing it the right way, whatever. So I just kept fishing it, and I eventually picked up another fish. And then, I think 5 minutes later, like 2 trees later, I caught another fish, and then I had 4 at that point, and I was kind of still struggling. I went, another hour or 2 without a bite. Kept fishing around. I was like, man, if I can just get one more, because I think I had like 75 inches, maybe 73 inches, something like that, with just 4 fish, which, that's bigger than some people's 5 fish limits.
Yeah.
It's not a great limit, but it's a okay-ish limit in a lot of tournaments. So I figured if I just got one more good one, I would be good for a check. So I just kept fishing that jig, flipping my arm off, legit just flipping my arm off until I couldn't flip anymore. And then finally, eventually, I got I think it was a 19 off a tree. And funny enough, Guillermo was kind of near me at that point too. He was like, "Oh, I heard you catch that fish. Like, I couldn't see you, but I could hear the fish flopping around in your kayak." And at that point, I was just stoked because I knew I needed that one more fish.
Yeah, to get that into the check, catching the check, right?
Yeah, to catch a check. I knew, if you have 4 fish, you have 0 chance of catching a check. Because
so you weren't calling at that point. You just wanted to get the
no,
last one. Okay.
I just wanted to get that last one. I think that was a little bit less than an hour to go, or right about an hour to go in the tournament. And that's the only other fish I had, the rest of the day. I didn't have anything else. I had 5 fish that I got in the boat. I didn't lose any fish. I missed maybe 1 or 2 bites, but for only having a handful of bites all day long, that's the thing about me going into the tournament. I knew that was potentially could be the case, that I wasn't going to get a ton of bites, but if I did get bites, they're probably going to be pretty good ones.
Nice. That's pretty cool, man. My stay like I'm gonna have to. You and I are gonna have to talk later because after the show, because I want to know how you caught them on trees. Because I tried. Granted, I was in Caddo, so might be different. But I couldn't get anything. Like I flipped jigs on trees, pre-fishing, didn't do it on the tournament. I just couldn't get a bite on it. To me, Thursday there was like throwing top water. I had a bunch of top water misses, and it was like literally like I would leave the top water on those little spots, bald spots between the grass and the lily pads, and bass will come up and just hit it, but just never actually bite it. So I was like, well, I'm getting top water bites. I got like 4 or 5. Couldn't even set the hook on any of them. I was like, all right, that's Thursday. Friday was the big cold front that came in. And to me, actually, Friday morning wasn't that bad. I caught like a 20. I caught like it was around a 7-pounder. It was like a football. And I caught it on a ribbon tail worm early in the morning. So I was like, all right, this spot is, that's good. But, it's one of those things where like you caught a big bass on a ribbon tail worm, unless they're schooling, I feel like that's kind of fool's gold. Like, maybe you'll catch him tomorrow, but it's not like a chatterbait bite or a crankbait with a chat pattern where that's working, that you make head a pattern. Whereas a ribbon tail worm could be just kind of like an isolated bass, which ended up being that. So I had that on the back of my mind, like I'm gonna keep throwing it, but understand that unless I get him schooling, that just isn't a bait that's gonna be like a pattern for the most part. Possum Kingdom last year, the guys that came up second and third, I think I forgot the names, where they were catching a purple or plum color ribbon tail worm, but that's because they got him schooling, and that's Possum Kingdom, which is different.
Yeah.
But the chatterbait bite was on fire on Friday. I was like, I was in an area where the water clarity was as far as deep as the lake was. If it was 6 feet deep, I would see the bottom. If I was 3 feet deep, I would see the bottom even more clearly. So water clarity was as whatever the depth was. And it was a lot of. I started throwing the chatterbait, worked great. I started, then I switched to like, well, maybe see if something other than, now I know that the chatterbait works. Let me see if something else works. And, anything that would look like a shad would get bites.
Yeah.
The area, like the boat lanes were like super clear water. I would see 18, 17, 19, 20-inch bass just swimming all around me. They weren't even scared of the kayak. They didn't even bother. So I couldn't get them all to bite, but I was like, all right, this is good. I felt super confident Saturday. I'm like, this is good. I ended up with like 87.5 inches on Friday without really on 5 bites. Once I got my 5 bites, I was out of there. Like I wasn't trying to, wear them out.
That's trying to win practice.
Yeah, I'm not trying to win practice, but I was like, I felt good. I was like, all right, now that I kind of figured it out, as the day, because it was such a cold weather after that, like 19.5 that I caught in the ribbon tailworm, it kind of died out. Then as the day got warmer, that's when the bite got it better. So I was like, all right, cool. I think this is a solid pattern. And if I start the day that way, because the expectation was that Saturday wasn't going to be as cold as Friday. So maybe the bite is going to be even more earlier. So I figured now that I can put in 8 hours of just throwing chatterbait and anything that looks like a bait fish, I may do better than 87 inches. Who knows? Maybe I'll get in the low 90s, mid 90s. You never know. The fish were there. I got, I think 19 and a half, 19 inches, 17 inches, stuff like that. A couple of like 14, 15 inches. Good. Saturday morning, there was not, I still had the whole place to myself, except for a couple of boats, but there was just boats racing up and down the boat lanes. And it muddied up everything. Like everything, the water clarity was gone. I didn't see any bass. I kept throwing the same stuff that I was throwing. Ended up being fool's gold, because in the first hour I caught a 14.5 incher. So I was like, all right, I caught a 14.5 incher. Good. I had a pike.
They're still here.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, they're still here. Then the boat started coming in and then got muddied up. And then I caught like a pike, a huge pike. Not pike, pickerel. I'm sorry.
Yeah, pickerel.
I should have retied, and I didn't. And the next bite was like maybe probably like a 12-inch bass, but it broke the line. And I was like, this bass is too small to break the line. I should have. And I even set up on my GoPro, like I was recording, and I'm hoping to get those videos out. Work has been so busy lately, so which is good, because I need the money but to pay for all this. But I haven't been able to do the video. But I said on the camera, it's like, oh, let me look at the line. I didn't see the line frayed, but I guess it was. I didn't notice it. Ended up losing it.
That's like my rule. If I catch a pickerel or a gar, line's getting retied, or if not, I'm gonna definitely inspect it extremely closely, because
and I should have
touched a little bit and it's gonna be frayed.
I mean, it only cost me at most, maybe it was something like a 12, 13-inch bass.
But you never know. That could have been a 24, and if it was,
it could have been. Yeah, if it wasn't, it couldn't. Another big bass could have bited.
Yeah, it could have been some other big bass. You never know. I've had that in the past where you're like, oh, whatever, it's probably fine. And then boom, you snap one off. You're like, that was a giant.
Yeah.
Why did I not retie?
Yes, I'm pre-fishing. I would have forgiven myself, but tournament.
Yeah, and pre-fishing, whatever. But in tournament, you better be retying.
But that was the one I have one chatterbait left. It's that chatterbait that has like a little orange belly, and then like a little yellow, not even chartreuse, more like yellow chartreuse pattern.
Does that have the gold blade?
No, not the gold blade.
Oh, okay.
It was the one that was working. After that, I couldn't get a bite. That's when the boats started coming in. I couldn't get the bite. Everything got muddied up. I think, and I'll make a video on this, because the importance of positive mental attitude couldn't be more evidence. Like, I was so down on myself. I was so frustrated on myself. Like, every failure in life seemed like it was crashing down at that moment. Like 4 hours in, I was like, well, it's gonna get warmer, it's gonna pick up. It worked, it's gonna get it. I just have to be patient with it. 4 hours into it, I only have one 14.5 incher. And those odds, I'm a failure. I don't know what I'm doing. I suck at this. Why do I even bother? I should sell all my stuff. I'm wasting hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on this crap. It's just, I decided, and I started looking at the landscapes like, all right, they're not in the boat channels anymore. They gotta be in the grass. They're not just gonna leave this whole area, right? Just because all of a sudden boats started coming in and muddied everything up. Like, they gotta be inside those. So it's like, what do we do? Okay, let's flip. I was still so frustrated. It took me, and I'm almost embarrassed to say it, it took me like 20 minutes to tie a snail knot. because my mind was, I was so frustrated. I didn't even want to do it. Like I was like, I was just like, my mind is not into it. And I finally,
Yeah.
after like 20 minutes, because you know how a snell knot is, you're supposed to thread it like front to back instead of back to front. When you talk about the, I don't know if people are familiar with the snell knot, but the
I don't
snell
even
knot.
use the snell knot,
So
honestly. Like I flip
I
a
love
ton,
it.
I don't even use
Be-
it.
When you tie it right, it is the best knot. But what happens with a snell knot, for those that don't know, once you get a bite, the weight of the bullet causes that hook to flip up. So you get a better hook set. Your hookup ratio gets better, especially when you're fishing grass, where it's a lot of times you're gonna lose. There's just, you can do the best hook set in the world, you still might lose it. You're fishing grass. It is what it is. But when you tie it right, which is you thread the line from the front to the back and then make the snail knot on the back, what it does is when that weight hits the hook goes up. So it's great. It's the best. It is to me the best knot for flipping. But when you do it backwards, which is what I did, it causes the reverse, causes the hook to flip backwards. So you're gonna lose every single fish because once it hooked, it'll unhook itself. And after spending like 10, 15 minutes trying to get the knot, I realized, oh, I did it reverse. I have to untie it, do it again. So I did it again. I was so frustrated. Like now it's not that I'm catching fish, now that I'm so stupid that I can't even tie a knot. That's where my mental attitude was. And what I want to share with people that might be listening and watching, what worked for me, and everybody's different, is like I took a deep breath, put the flipping stick aside after I tied the knot, and decided I need something to break this kind of like snowball effect of everything going wrong. And the way that I know how to do it is I'm gonna go back to my chatterbait. I'm gonna throw it, even though I know I'm not gonna catch anything because I haven't caught anything for the since the first 20 minutes of the tournament started. But at least I get the feeling that I can bob cast something and like I can do something right,
Yeah.
which is cast. Like just like half a dozen casts, just where I'm feeling good about where I'm casting, just feeling nice, just like let the straight out, bomb stress out of you, bomb cast it, reel it in, kind of like do something that makes you feel a little bit better. And to me, just doing a couple of good casts kind of gets me into a groove. So once I did that, I went back to flipping. And I was like, okay, now my head's a little bit better. Now I'm in a little bit more confident. Now I know that I can do a cast. Keep in mind, I haven't done any grass flipping lately. Like it's been almost a year since I tied a snail knot. This it's not grass flipping. It's not what my go-to. But I found out I'm actually a lot better than I thought it was.
Yeah, you
So
caught
I
fish doing
started. I caught like a 12 and a half first flip, 12 and a half. Okay, it's
it.
not a big, but just setting the hook on something is like, oh God, it feels so good. And in a span of like an hour, I get my limit. And it's just flipping. And I know there's a lot of like people talk about the frog bite is their top water bite is their favorite bite. You see the blow up. I don't know about you. I'm Brian. You love fishing on grass. You probably done grass punching. I say flipping,
Oh
but what we
yeah,
call
it's one of my
grass
favorite
punching.
things, if not my favorite thing.
Setting the hook on a big bass, punching grass is probably the best feeling in the world.
Yeah.
It is, and you can see. The thing about it is, you can lay it. You're supposed to lay on him as hard as you can. That's the thing about it. It's not like like a crankbait where you lean on it, or a what do you call it? A wacky rig where you kind of have to tie them out. This is like full testosterone. Set the hook to the skies, reel that sucker in, get it out of the grass. Makes you feel like a man, kind of thing. So that was to me that was what changed everything. I ended up catching 5, and then like an hour in, it kind of died down, and then an hour in, I needed one more to call and get me from the mid 70s to get me to at least low 80s. I ended up with 81 and a half, and I caught like a 19-incher, and that felt amazing. It's like, all right, now I have to head back. 18 and a half. It's not what I thought. I thought starting day one, I would end up with 91 and a half or somewhere along that, considering that Friday I did 87 and a half.
Yeah.
But looking back at how all the landscape changed with all the boats and the water getting muddied and having to do something that I don't normally do, maybe do it once or twice a year, I feel good about myself. And this is where it comes in. For you, this 81.5 was probably been a failure. To me, it was like best day ever, considering what I went through the first 4 hours. And then day two was like, I even thought to myself, I'm just gonna take my flipping hooks, my flipping stick, and that's it. Like I'm gonna go light, but I figured no, don't be an idiot. If you can put all your other rods
At
on
least
it.
bring that chatterbait.
Yeah.
At
So,
least.
but I went right back to that place. There was nobody there. And I for 8 hours, all I do, that's like I don't care for better or worse, hell or high water. I am flipping every square inch of this football field size area, and it's I'm gonna do it for better or worse. And I put in my mind, I am gonna get my limit. I know I'm gonna get my limit. I know they're here. I caught them yesterday.
Yeah.
Not doubt yourself. And man, little by little, I started with like a 12-incher, 15-incher. And then all of a sudden, when it warmed up, man, that was like an 18-incher, 17-incher, another 17-incher, a 19-incher. And man, the best feeling in the world. Ended up with 90. No, I didn't get to 90. I'm sorry, 87.5. I did lost a big one that would have got me. My smallest one was a 15-incher. I saw it. I'm not saying this because I'm BSing. I actually saw the bass when he came out. It's funny thing is like I guess it was biting on the bullet because when I looked at it, the first thing I thought is like, I know I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
I feel horrible losing a fish when I know I screwed up. But when I do everything textbook and it comes out, it comes out. It is what it is. Even if you do completely 100% right, doesn't mean you're not gonna lose it. And I look at my bait, the hook, the barb was still inside the soft plastic. So I was like, all right, I saw it swim away, and I was like, man, that would have called my 15-incher. That would have got me probably. Well, at that point, I hadn't called, so I was like, that would have got me closer to 90 inches. Ended up being that I would have gotten the mid 90s if I hadn't lost that one. But all in all, it felt good. Like 1 hour in, an hour left. No, maybe like 30 minutes left. A guy was with a boat, kind of like opening, kind of like trailblazing, opening up grass and flipping on grass. And he's asking me, have you caught anything decent? And just as he says that, I hook him into a 19-incher. I'm like,
Nice.
yeah. And that got me to 87.5. And that was my last pass.
Yeah. Was there a lot less boats on Sunday there?
Yes, considerably less.
So will the water clear up a bit?
It did, especially where I caught him, but I figured at that point I was still gonna. There
You just
was
had
a
the
little,
confidence in flipping.
yeah, I did for a minute when it got like when the bite got died down. I still threw the chatterbait just for kicks, just to see.
Keep it honest. Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't get a bite, so I was like, I'm gonna keep flipping. But I literally, like I would fan cast or not cast, but flip punch grass. Like I will start like from left to right, back out, move a little, move like 5 feet over, do the same thing, move 5. Like I must have done like 100, like 1,000 flips or punching or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. See, that's what they said before. Like you're flipping trees, you weren't getting anything. And I feel like that's how Caddo is in the fall.
Yeah.
Like they're in the grass in the fall on Caddo. Like you go the spring on Caddo, they're all up in those trees. But in the fall, not really. They're usually in the grass.
What I like about Caddo is there's 2 tournaments. I fished it 3 times. There's been 2 tournaments that I feel like it pushed me to become a better angler. The first time that I fished it was for the Hobie BOS. And I pre-fished it Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And I hadn't caught anything because I was throwing chatterbaits, on grass and all that. And it was in spring. Yeah. And I remember calling Rolando Nandina. I'm like, dude, I need a pep talk. I need something. Like, help me out here. What do you think? And he's like, dude, take a deep breath, grab something, like grab a spinnerbait, a spinning setup. not a spinner bait, a spinning rod, spinning reel,
Yeah.
and just skip a weightless Senko into those trees. But I'm not at that point. I wasn't good at it, and I've never even tried to skip on a spinner on a spinner on a spin setup. So I took like Friday, like practice day was all about trying to skip, learning how to skip a Senko, and turns out it wasn't that complicated. But I ended up catching a limit on day one. So I was like, all right, this now I've learned something. Like put something in my arsenal that I can move forward to. Like I learned a new trick or a new technique that I wasn't used to. And this time around, it was kind of like that same thing. It was like, all right, I put in practice punching grass, which is something that I've never been comfortable, nor that I ever thought I was good at. And turns out I'm kind of decent at it. So
Yeah.
things like that are to me, going from a mindset of an angler who's not an elite angler like yourself, where my goals may be a little bit lower on the bar than yours, it felt good to at least say, hey, you know what, I got it. My first time actually getting a 2-day limit on a 2-day national trail, and B, actually learning a new technique. So to me, I felt good about it, even if I didn't get the results that you look for first place, or if not, top 5 to qualify for the championship, if not catch a check, and then the list goes down. Okay, not getting skunk, kind of thing. So it was a good feeling. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's important to go to those tournaments and just you learn a new thing. Like that's the thing about tournament fishing. You just fish a lot of tournaments. You're gonna go all over the place.
yeah,
You're gonna learn all sorts of new techniques. Like you said, you really haven't punched before too much. But then, well, now you go to any other lake where there's matted grass. You're gonna feel confident when you go over and say, "Oh, look, I'm not catching anything else. Throwing jackhammer or throwing anything else. Let me just go flip." You just start going flipping and punching that grass, and you know you immediately know you're gonna probably catch them because you learned it. You know it now.
yeah.
That's the thing about people too, though. Like for punching, for sure, guys will give it like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and they don't catch anything, and they're just done. You have to give it a lot of time. I feel like.
That's the thing about it. It's I feel like you throw like a chatterbait. Oh, they're not biting. You can okay, well throw a crankbait. Or I'll throw a Texas rig. Punching it, you have to get fully committed to it.
Yeah.
Like you have to say, okay, it doesn't mean like, all right, mine was a little bit not exaggerated, but to me, kind of extreme to say I'm going to punch for a whole 8 hours. Probably wouldn't advise anybody to do that in hindsight, because your arm's going to hurt, especially if you're like, I was throwing like a 1.5 at one
One and
point.
a
The
half.
grass was so thick. In other areas, the grass was like lighter and I could get away with a 1 ounce. And then in other areas, I think it's 1.25 that I have to start. It's like, all right, the 1 ounce is not getting through. Let me throw something a little bit heavier. But yeah, that is kind of exaggerated. But the point is, it's like you can't just do 3 or 4 casts in just like little area over here and think that you're gonna have success. I did saw at one point there was a boat that saw me caught one, so they started doing it in one side of the boat lane. But they were like, their trolling motors, they were nonstop. They were like, they were going like 1 mile per hour, flip. Okay, go get another
Yeah,
one, flip. And they caught, I think, 2.
they caught two.
And then one of them I saw that was pretty big. But it was like, all right, if I want to get 8, then I'm gonna have to commit to it. Like if they in 30 minutes of them or so going down and they caught 2, imagine what I can do if I just pick it apart and fan cast.
Yeah, were you catching them like way back in the stuff or like more on the edge?
No, more on the edge. So day 1, I caught it more on the edge. Day 2, I figured I'm looking for bigger bites. Let me see if I can push through this grass and get
Yeah,
into what I would call those ponds. Not really a pond, but you know what I'm saying. It's like this
just the
bowl, big.
holes.
Yes. But when I saw, when the water is stagnant or it's not getting a lot of movement, it creates this like white film on top of it. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
So once I saw that, I was like, ooh, that means there's not a lot of water movement here. I don't know. One thing that I've learned over time, and I learned this, I remember the day, December 31st, 2021. I went with Carlos Torres to a little known lake that I'm not going to mention the name. And we started throwing chatterbaits on lily pad stem and dead grass. I've always been told if you see dead grass or dead vegetation, you're probably not going to find bass because I guess mainstream knowledge would say, or I forgot the word that I'm looking for, but like common knowledge would say, well, the grass is dying, so it's depleted of oxygen. And I found that not to be true. I caught like 30 bass that day on a chatterbait, and it was all on dying vegetation. So when I started flipping on the lake, I started on the edge. It was dead grass. I heard somebody told me that was had just sprayed or that recently has sprayed that area to
Oh
keep.
yeah.
So I thought at first it's like, well, this is the closest area going to start flipping, but it's dead grass or it's dead vegetation or dying vegetation. But I've learned that that mentality is not always right. So I ended up catching like an 18 incher and a couple of 19 inches and a couple of 18 and 17 inches on that dead grass. And then I switched to the where it was a lot greener grass, a lot thicker, and I did caught the 19 inches. So it was on both sides. But I opened myself like a channel. I had to paddle like I was worn out. It's just like, man, I feel like I paddle on mine, I only paddle like 10 feet just through this grass just to open up the grass and get to
Yeah.
those little bold spots. But there was no water movement and I couldn't catch anything. I figured, well, it kind of makes sense because there's no oxygen or not that there's no oxygen, but the water, the current's not flowing. It's water that's been stagnant for God knows how long, probably all summer.
Yeah. When you get back, it's just such a pain paddling a pro angler to like those little holes and stuff. I
Yeah.
used to do it all the dang time in my outback, and it was not a big deal. In the pro angler, like I still
Yeah.
do it, but it's just so much harder.
you're like 3 feet away and you see that patch of grass and you just in your mind Christian like get through this. God damn it, like I can't get through. But I mean if
Yeah.
you paddle, that's what I mean on a paddle that has the the traditional rotator, what do we call it, the not the fins but the
Propeller.
propeller, that's the word I'm looking for. You can't do it, but with the fins you can't do it, but it is a lot of exercise. I was like wearing my thighs out trying to power through it.
Yeah, it's a pain in the butt for sure, but
Yeah.
sometimes it pays off. Like you got to try it every time at least. Like you might do it a few times and not catch anything, and you're like, well, all right, maybe that's not the deal. But sometimes you do it once, and you're like, all right, I guess I'm gonna do this all day long because
Yeah.
there's tons of fish back there.
Yeah, I thought it might, but again, that it felt like that water wasn't like it was no movement on that water. But who knows? I wanted to try like a little like makeshift boat channel that mud puddlers had like speeded through, so it kind of made a cut, but it
Yeah,
wasn't really a cut. But then a boat started going as it was getting close to 3 o'clock. So I was like, man, I really wanted to go through that, see if that because those mud puddlers, what not only do they open, but they stir up the oxygen. They bring a little bit more oxygen into that area, and it kind of like new area where they might be and have not been pressured. But I couldn't get to. There was a boat coming in. I was like, ah. So I couldn't get to that part. The guy boat caught like 10-pound. What do you call it? It's not a snakehead, bowfin. I thought
yeah.
he had a huge bass. I'm like, oh my god, he was like,
Punching.
oh. Yeah, no, he wasn't punching. I think he
Okay.
was throwing. I don't know what it was. Probably a jig. Maybe he was. It was casting. He wasn't punching, but he caught like a bowfin. And when I saw it splashing, I thought at first he had like I don't know, like a 10-pound bass. But he was like, no, it's a bowfin.
Yeah. I got
But
fooled in practice on Caddo a few times, just catching those pickerel. I was like, "Oh, it's a good one," and then no, no,
yeah,
no, it's a pickerel.
I felt bad. There's a guy that wasn't fishing the Bassmaster, but was fishing the Louisiana Bass Nation, I think it was, which I think it was only 1 day tournament.
Yeah, that was only one day.
He was fishing on the other side on Saturday, that the other where the grass was greener,
Yeah,
where I caught that pickerel. And I'd see him hooking seems like every 10 minutes he would hook up into a big bass. And I was like, awesome, you got one. And it's like, no, it's a pickerel. 5 minutes later, oh, you got one. No, it's a pickerel again. He's like,
Jeez.
we were leaving around the same time. And of course, because he's not on the Bassmaster, I can't really ask him anything, you know, if we're both in the Bassmaster. When, again, you're not supposed to ask, but we can have conversations. But we really want, you know, he knew the rules, so he wants a conversation. But all he said is like, if I was fishing a pickerel tournament, I would hands down lap the field.
Yeah.
And I saw him like every time I thought it's like, oh, he has a big bass. Nope. He must have caught like 10 pickerel, man.
Yeah, I don't know why. It seemed like they were really biting this last time, because for me, I caught quite a few. Normally I don't catch any, or you know, I might catch like one. No, I think I caught them all on a little flashy swimmer. That's what I was catching them on Caddo during practice. A little like 3.3 Kitech with a flashy swimmer. And they were just loving it.
It was he was throwing a white chatterbait, and when I got the pickerel, I was throwing a white chatterbait as well. They love that white chatterbait, I'll tell you what. Is it pickerel is not the same thing as a pike, right?
No, they're related, I think.
I'm assuming,
you know, it's the South's pike, basically.
Redneck pike.
Redneck pike. Yeah.
Well, I've had you for an hour and 30 minutes, Bryan, so I appreciate the time, man. It's a fun episode talking about, you know, your accomplishment. Congratulations again. By the way, congratulations to Fluke Master Gene Jensen, who actually won the tournament. I did reach out to him. He was unavailable. Hopefully we'll get him here sometime before the season is over or the year is over. We'll talk about Caddo Lake. But congratulations to you for catching the check. AOY, Russ Snyder back-to-back on solidifying as probably the best kayak angler on kayak bass fishing right now. In the short story of kayak bass fishing, he won AOY. He might actually win AOY for the Hobie BOS. Would be like the first time anybody has win back to back. I mean, Bassmaster's brand new, so obviously nobody has won back to back. But I think the first time anybody wins like 2 AOYs in 2 of the major trails, that being Bassmaster and the Hobie BOS. Guys, another level.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you again, Bryan. Any last words? Anybody you want to thank? Sponsors, family?
Yeah, sure. Just want to thank my wife, my son, all my family and friends in California and in Texas, and Mariner Sales for sure. Dakota Lithium, Newport, Dobbins Rods. I think that's it.
Awesome. We'll see you at Bodak, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna fish. I guess I'm gonna go practice it, and I guess not this weekend. I'm gonna go fish Fork this weekend, a little boat tournament, and then practice Bodark the next weekend, and the tournaments after that. So that'll be the next kayak tournament for me.
That's it. All right, buddy. Thank you so much for taking the time, man. Good luck at Bodark, and again, thank you for taking the time, man. I know I kept you for an hour and 30 minutes, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's always a good time.
All right. For those that are watching, listening, remember you can follow us on Bass Kayak and Beers, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Check out Mariner Sales' biggest kayak store and kayak accessory stores in the DFW Metroplex. They also do great rigging and customizing, so go check them out. Mariner Sales. You can also buy online at marinersales.com. Norsk Lithium, Douglas Rod, Dark Horse Tackle, and Catch Outdoors. Have a good day, everyone. If you're going to be on the water, wear your PFDs. Have a great evening. Peace.